Hello everyone, and we are with Scott from Biscuits and Colm from Commerce Gurus.
Hello everybody, I'm Scott. I'm CEO, co-founder of Big Scoots for 18 years. I've been holding this position since inception. We own and operate the entire stack, server, site, and edge. And as a result of that, we're able to affect change at every meaningful level as it relates to WooCommerce. Naturally, that makes us very excited to have this conversation today just because of how focused we are on WooCommerce.
Hey, yeah, I'm Colm from Commerce Gurus, founded in 2014. We were one of the first WooCommerce theme specialists on the planet. I've been in the WordPress community since probably 2006, 2007. And yeah, Scott mentioned we kind of worked together with quite a few of the kind of larger volume WooCommerce stores over the years. So in addition to the Shoptimizer theme and the Commerce Kit plugin, which would be things a lot of people would know us for, we also do quite a lot of work with some of the large WooCommerce stores in the ecosystem.
Excellent. So my question to Scott is, you mentioned earlier that Big Scoots manages everything from the server to the network. So how does controlling the 3 layers help WooCommerce run faster compared to standard hostings?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's certainly a big topic to unpack, but collectively, I do feel, and I believe it to be very true, that the server, the site, and the edge are ultimately the 3 primary layers that you need to be concerned with in order to add performance and meaningful scale and ultimately cost effectiveness to a highly dynamic environment like WooCommerce. And the reasons for those are at the server level, all of the PHP processing, which is ultimately all of your add to carts and logged in actions, all of that flows through PHP and ultimately requires the underlying server resources to be abundant and performative. It's very difficult to procure that type of infrastructure in the cloud. So if you're leveraging like Google or Amazon or what have you, you typically don't get the same resource abundance and performative resources as you would otherwise get if you were to find yourself in an environment like ours that we specifically procure for dynamic applications like WooCommerce. So at the server level, there is pretty dramatic benefits. We're talking about 2 to 3 times the performance. So it just, if you were to add to cart in a sort of a standard environment versus add to cart in one of our dynamic performance environments, you would imagine that add to cart to perform 2 or 3 times faster. It's very dramatic and very immediate. You can see it, in front of your eyes. In addition to that, you want the scale and the support of a seasoned administrative team to be able to support those ebbs and flows throughout your year. Typically speaking, you've got large traffic at one moment in time. Maybe you've got a large newsletter at another moment in time. You have different marketing campaigns and different things that are happening. And you also just want to be able to support the dynamic interests of the internet these days, all the AI bot crawlers and all these things that are happening. You want the underlying resources to be able to support that, not just in fair weather, not just during these predictable spikes and marketing pushes, but also during all the eventualities that can occur just existing online. So at the server level, there's a lot of optimization that can occur. At the site level, if we move up a rung, if you will, having seasoned system administrators, true level 3 technicians, being able to walk through plugin configurations, being able to understand if a stuck PHP process or something is too slow moving relative to what it should be doing, making sure that database transactions and your database tables are trimmed, and all these things that ultimately compound to a more efficient user cycle, user sales cycle, right? Finally, at the edge, which is sort of the 3rd layer, if you will, the top layer, making sure that we're caching as much as we possibly can really dramatically improves, once again, performance and scale. And if you affect change on performance and scale, you're also affecting change on cost efficiency as well, because you can drive more traffic, more visitors, more revenue without actually, raising your costs if those 2 things are also true. So each one of those things on its own is beneficial, but all 3 of them together is not a linear progression towards better scale and performance. It's actually that hockey stick growth that we all like to see, which is how you get ahead of the typical problems that are plagued in the WooCommerce space sort of as you scale. You don't any longer run into those 500 resource errors or slow checkout times or the never-ending recommendation to continue to upgrade your plan because you need more resources. And the nice thing about it too is that if you do act on all those 3 layers and truly, care about the customer and truly offer, value in that way, you also partner with folks like Colm and commerce gurus and other authorities in the space to be able to further improve, some of that performance, some of that scale.
Right. So because you introduced Colm and the fact that they are working on the site level. So the question for Colm would be then, right, hosting is one part, then comes the WooCommerce website. So what's your process to analyze and improve a WooCommerce website to make sure that then it works well with the hosting platform?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a question that we could probably have a whole conference on itself.
Yeah.
I'm going to cherry pick one specific kind of, I don't know, it's a story or a nightmare or a scenario just to kind of illustrate one particular thing that I think a lot of people in our industry, for better or for worse, don't spend a lot of time thinking about, which is the whole area of APMs and application performance management, which the folks at Big Scoots have also done amazing work on over the years and been great assistants to us. But I'll frame it as simple as follows. Imagine it's Black Friday. You've just sent out that magical email to 1.2 million customers. And a couple of minutes later, your load times on your checkout have suddenly gone from 250 milliseconds to 8 seconds. And your Slack is blowing up with people saying, what the hell is going on? And you say, I have no effing idea. Oh, crap. So that tends to be where we have all the scar tissue built up from years of that and seeing kind of all of the best hosting in the world. It's like that famous line, what was it, the Mike Tyson line? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? You can put all of the most amazing infrastructure in place, but bad code's bad code, right? And the process about trying to find bad code, it is something that I think in our industry, I like to call it homeopathy. Like this, if you look at Reddit and you look at Slack threads and you look at WooCommerce Facebook groups, you'll say, oh, this such and such a plugin is very slow, or that hosting company is terrible, or that hosting company is amazing. You just need to upgrade your workers, that Scott alluded to. And a lot of it is guesswork and conspiracy theories. And actually the process about actually finding out, first of all, being able to observe what's happening, trace the problem, and then actually go and find it is where an APM or application performance monitoring comes into place. So to me, that's something that we just don't spend a lot of time actually doing. There's not enough people in our industry who do it. And it's, that's what we've talked, I think, at Checkout Summit in person a few weeks ago. We talked about Shopify a lot and why people go there. And it's like, well, infrastructure is a solved problem. You've got somebody in Shopify who's worrying about that problem. And actually, it doesn't have to be that way for WooCommerce. And that's where I think even the likes of, that's kind of that nice sweet spot between your hosting company and your whoever's writing code for your WooCommerce store. It's where you kind of meet in the middle and you can be very effective. So in that scenario where that's where I mentioned earlier where we sent out an email, 1.2 million, and you're checking. That was a real thing. That happened to a mutual customer of Commerce Gurus and Big Scoots many, many years ago now. At the time, basically, my answer was, I have no effing idea. Now, when I cracked open New Relic, what I was very quickly able to see was my database operations had gone from something like 50,000 reads a minute to 30 million, which was something of an odd number. And I think even Big Scoots may have actually proactively told us that was happening. But the process about going and finding out why that happened, this was something that was just far too unusual. It wasn't just the fact that we had sent out an email. This was a stack that had been optimized out the wazoo. We had all of the very lightweight front end, pass all core web vitals, all the caching layers, everything else. Turns out what had happened is that you cannot stop somebody. You can, but in this case, somebody had updated the plugin 5 minutes before that had gone out. And lo and behold, that vendor, but I won't name them, shame them here because we all make mistakes. What they had done was they had introduced a regression error in one of their plugins that actually was reading or attempting to do a count on all orders in the table for every single request. It wasn't wrapped behind. It was an import function, I think at the time it was. And it wasn't wrapped up and encapsulated correctly. And again, it was a regression error, right? So this is a store that was finely tuned. Everything was perfect, but you're only one update away from everything exploding. And literally this Murphy's Law is Murphy's Law. This literally happened just before that email went out and things go haywire. Now, in that scenario where if you're falling back on, kicking the side of the car and trying to fix it, it's not going to work, right? But an APM allows you to get in there. In that example, we were able to see our number of DB reads has gone absolutely bonkers here. This is something that's far in effect of way bigger than what we would even get from previous Black Friday events for that customer. And then we were able to just go down through the stack and find that particular bug. As soon as we switched off that plugin, or actually just commented out that code or shipped a patch for it at that point in time, we've seen our reads drop from that 30 million a minute right down to like 250,000 a minute, which would have been the normal spike that you would expect to see. And that was back, by the way, this was a plugin at the time, and something we always recommend is to do a lot of due diligence on plugins. Don't trust but verify, and do code reviews and look at it. This is when people actually read and wrote, code organically before we delegated all that to LLMs. And, again, good plugins go bad. Sometimes we all ship mistakes, right? So, you can have your store perfectly optimized and then introduce a regression error at the worst possible time. So I guess like the big takeaway, I think, is, even when you have all the best plans in the world, you do need something to help you, especially in the white hot heat of a Black Friday event. You need some help. And that's where, for me, an APM comes into place. And New Relic is one. There's lots of them. There's Grafana and Prometheus is an open source stack that you don't need to pay. And New Relic is a pretty decent free tier to start with. And the folks at Big Scoots have their own APMs internally and a lot more diagnostics to get data in real time. So I guess my takeaway would be, in terms of just like what people should be doing from this, and what we do a lot, is install an APM, get your hands on one, work with your hosting company to do it, talk to Scott and the gang at Big Scoots around how best to do this, and actually learn how to use those tools, because I think that is something that we as an ecosystem can get a lot better at. And I think that actually solves a lot of the problems when we talk about infrastructure and we talk about WooCommerce versus other platforms.
Yeah, and Colm, you mentioned proactive. You don't make sure, don't wait until you have an issue to then install an APM and then ultimately hit up a host that is maybe not specialized in management or WooCommerce and ask them to solve that issue, right? That is a failing business model, because you will, if you're not running into resource errors and scale problems today, even as a very sophisticated developer, you will eventually. And
I want to finish this by asking you a super simple, plain English question, Scott, which is, we all get this and it's fine, but at the end of the day, like, what's the actual problem with standard hosting? What's the actual difference? What are we fixing here?
Holistic, by the way, is kind of the word that I would use to describe the ultimate solution. I think, you can certainly have an undersized environment, right? And you're just going to run into the natural resource errors that you would expect to run into in those types of scenarios. You could run into really inefficient processing. So at the site layer, like just having really, really inefficient processes, making sure that those problems are solved and having the right partners to help solve those for you, and ultimately using the edge to help solve really the same thing, right? It all comes down to a dynamic requirement that WooCommerce has. Having the ability to find the right people and put them in the right corners, solves an issue that I think is just inherent to anything dynamic. You want everything to be smooth. You want that, extremely positive customer experience. And really, in today's modern era, that's defined as somebody who can land on your store, add to cart very quickly, proceed through the checkout even faster, and end up in a sort of logged in state or an action, a monitoring state, immediately following that. If each one of those steps takes 30 seconds or it fails, or, any number of other, user experience problems that might, you're going to get abandoned carts, you're going to lose revenue. And you want to combat that with, a well-oiled machine.
Great. Yeah, I think now I get it. But apparently this all-in-one solution, brings it all under the same umbrella, and you can get it fixed. And speaking of fix, if people want to keep going with the conversation, Big Scoots has a nice landing page, which is bigscoots.com/WooFix. And there will be resources, because this is something that no one ever talks about in the WooCommerce space.